thanks you all for coming out on a beautiful day when you could be, I don't know, being outside with your horses or just walking around the land. I'm James, and you know, the pandemic was kind of like a strange moment for all of us, and for an artist who wanted to be outside all the time. It was particularly strange. I ended up spending a lot of time communicating with my friend Sarah Bitter, who's a poet, and someone I know way back from college. And we decided that we should collaborate on something, work on a project together. And I was like, okay, well, we need a project. And I was like, well, what about war? And it was really the first time I'd been so directed in my work. And so this is a painting that I made thinking about war. Like, I've never been in a war. I wasn't part of the military. And I grew up in Texas in a pretty sheltered suburb. And my really most visceral experience with war is probably Desert Storm. I was watching it on television, and in particular the image of the missiles kind of going into someone's front door. That's an image I think we all kind of remember. It was like must-see TV. The painting I want to show also, because it has something that's kind of, I think, I've been working on throughout my work for the past few years, and that's the idea of how I get started. And you'll see there's just some shapes, right? And shapes are the kinds of things that we'll see everywhere in the world. For me, I look for shapes that are between things, like between the branches of a tree, or between the people sitting out here, or between the furniture. And so this is kind of how I might get started. On the left, you can see the beginning of the drawing, where I'm just kind of gritting out random shapes that I see in the world. And then as I kind of move closer, you can start to see things slowly develop. There's an image which eventually becomes the man with the pipe, but I think that it was started off, all I could see was this sort of dog god, or the Egyptian god Anubis. But that had very little to do with war. But over time, this is how I work. I'm generally. This is the drawing as it got finished. My sense of war was really just kind of like, war is just an awful thing, and so all I could really think of was just decapitations and just outright brutality. My dialogues with Sarah, we talked a lot about what happens to the children during the war and whatnot. But I just wanted to share some process. Let's see. I like working this way because I don't really know what I'm doing. I never know what I'm doing, to be honest, in the studio. In some ways I'm very uncomfortable that way, but also it's the only way I know how to work. Sometimes I don't even know what to do with colors. I got a new tube of cobalt blue. I met the great-grandson of Seignelier, the man who, from the paint company. And he had brought this little tube of Seignelier that was contemporary with Cézanne, and we got to touch it. I actually dipped my finger in this tiny piece of cobalt blue. So I went out and got a big tube of Seignelier cobalt blue. And this was a painting that was very much about that color and the material, and me just trying to figure out what to do with the blue. This painting is 14 by 20 inches, and I think one of the paintings I'm going to show are at the scale, kind of like 14 by 20 inches. I think a lot about place. I've been fortunate enough to have gone to a lot of different places. I was spent a few weeks in the Olympic National Forest up in Washington State, and there's some forests out there that are just green with mosses, with all, like 1,000 different kinds of greens and 1,000 different kinds of mosses. And so I think ultimately what I do is I'm making landscape paintings, and I'm not really thinking about war or anything particularly so much as this idea of land. And land is just a strange thing. Out here, I'm really looking for water that I can fish on, and there are pieces of water that I know that hold fish, but that are on public land, but I actually don't know how to get there because they're surrounded by private land, and I don't know how to get there. And as many of you will know, that this, Wyoming is a state that had many people before we had cities on it. The Arapaho, the Arikara, the Bannock, the Blackfeet, the Cheyenne, the Crow, the Gros Ventre, the Kiowa, the Nez Perce, the Sheep Eaters, the Sioux, the Shoshone, and the Ute. And land acknowledgements are something that are becoming common today, and even though they seem very significant, but just to acknowledge that this land was, that people had this land before us, is also seemingly very insignificant. Had read a lot of Rebecca Stolnett and hearing her protest on in the lands in New Mexico and Nevada when we're using the land to do nothing else but to test bombs on. And so this is a painting that I made really thinking about what it meant to have too much land, or land that was no good other than to make to prepare for war. And the land is, we do all sorts of things to it, and also our world is changing. That there's no water anymore in the world, and we have to deal with fires. I'm reading the Sheridan paper every day, or maybe last week's news today. And it looks like we're gonna probably have a very warm summer out here, and there's not a lot of water, even though there's a lot of runoff still in the creeks and the rivers. This is a painting I made in Joshua Tree at a place called Barker Dam. It's probably, if you've been out there, it's a place you've probably gone to. It's not really a hike to get to it, but it's the only place in the park that has standing water, and it's filled with like 1,000 little tiny shrimp. This is a painting called Drift. And if you fly fish, there's this idea where you're trying to achieve this idea called the dead drift, which is where you cast the fly out into the water and it just kind of follows the water, and it looks just like a fly would float down perfectly. Titling paintings is something that's kind of difficult for me. My friend Aaron used to title my paintings before he passed, and it was not only did I lose one of my dearest friends, but I had no idea what was going to happen with my titles. So Sarah very gratefully took on the role of titling my paintings. So we actually went back and forth on this. I was like, well, dead drift, and he's like, but I don't want this to be dead, and so we just settled on the idea of drift. This is the painting that's not 14 by 20 inches. It's actually the largest painting I've made in my life. It's 8.5 by 12 feet. So it's a pretty big painting. I wanted it to be big, really, because I wanted to make something significant. There was like a period of 3 months that I'd been to 4 funerals, including my own father's memorial. And I think this is a painting that, I don't know, I just wanted it to be heavy. Like one that if you saw, you'd be kind of like left with like, oh, I saw something really big, in all sorts of ways. This is a painting called Smoke Set. And I met Aaron today, and who told me that he's a poet. And he said something really nice, was that you should read a poem every day, or write a poem every day, or be a poem every day. Well, I kind of want my paintings to be poems. And so I want to leave you guys with a poem by my friend Sarah Bitter. Later you tell me your favorite work of his was a sleeping taxidermied rooster, eyes shut, mechanically breathing. We meet in a place of sand. Sand knows something about grinding down, something about glittering. I'm so sorry. It's true and vast and empty. Like the sky here, with the way it hits my eyes hard. The house is peaceful this morning. I look around and there are prints on the walls, branches and flowers that have, you say, a nice touch. And I wonder about that word touch, which ends with a soft exhale, but which began by meaning to strike, as in a bell. And about that other word, grief, which ends with a fricative F, a weight of teeth. For an artist, is there anything worse than being interrupted? I can answer that, because you are moving around the kitchen and I've lost my train of thought in the sand, it gets everywhere. In botany, the term interrupted means made discontinuous, interrupted by barrenness or branching. The bushes on this high plateau are wide apart. This must be something about water, but what I'm saying is lack. I didn't ask then what your friend's work was like, and you didn't say. Instead, telling me what he was like, and telling me about a bonsai that he once offered you, even though he was broke and probably using it. You wondered about what it is to rework a poem, explaining that when you rework a painting, you must decide what to erase, what you are going to lose. I told you I don't have to lose anything. It's all digital. I can get it back. Of course, that isn't true. I watched the sky redden this morning, once. In the clay soils of this basin, when water takes away the salt, the ground becomes something else, unstable. From someone else's poem, I learned that sand dunes have a slip face and a slack. I want to tell you about this. I want to make it mean everything. Thank you. And I think next is. Oh.
And I have one. Did you start out doing landscapes and then things just generally or like progress from there, or were you drawing something else when you first realized like you wanted to change into your style now?
I started off painting still lifes. That's kind of how I got started. Looking is very, very important to me. I just like to stare at things, and sometimes it can be creepy, but there's something about looking where sounds disappear and time stands still. And so the work is, while it's very invented, it also does come from observation. I'm looking around for shapes. I'm harvesting shapes, and so in that way I'm still kind of like a still life painter. I think the landscape. I think I'm a landscape painter. I think people have said that about my work, and I'm happy to think that, or to have that. But as I think about the work, I'm really just thinking about land, and I don't know if there's a thing called a land painter, but that might be, I don't know. I think they are landscapes, no doubt.
Would you describe the collaboration you have with the poet, probably the process that you use?
Yeah, well, we text, email a lot. She'll send me a folder of poems, and also, Sarah's probably one of like my most, one of the few people that really pays attention to my work. So I'll send her an image, like I send her an image every time something's a new move happens, and we'll talk. I'm going to be spending some time in Montana. She and her partner are going to come out, and we'll get together. She lives in Seattle. I live in Chicago. We haven't really done anything together other than, our brainstorming, I suppose. Like, we don't have like we haven't, put an exhibition together or made a book, but I think, but we work together, I would say. We're working together in some ways.
Thank you.
I love that interpretation of collaboration. That's really freeing to me. So I'm curious about, you talked about the space between things and looking at that, and I'm curious about how you think about that space. I feel like some people talk about it as emptiness, and some people talk about it as like the opposite of that, and I wonder if you've gotten it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. In art school, they you might learn like, look for the negative shapes. And well, negative is just sort of like, it's like a kind of a negative, it's got a very negative connotation in the most literal sense. One of the things that I strive for in my paintings and my drawings is this idea of, well, there's sort of like a figure-ground relationship that's also like a very art school thing. There's like, it could be the bottle or the tree and then the land around it, or the person in the literal ground. I wanted to focus on these spaces in between, because in a way I want to make a work where there is no figure or there is no ground, or they collapse on each other, where there is nothing that is secondary to something else. I think that's like sometimes that works, and sometimes it's just like it's like a windmill that you're kind of trying to stab at.
I'm intrigued by mark making in your work. In one of the first drawings, everything was, was vertical, and I looked at it and blinked and almost thought it was like a weaving or a tapestry. And then you moved into the paintings, and I guess because of the fluidness of the material. But your mark making creates a very distinctive texture in your work. Can you talk about?
Yeah,
'cause you talk about shape, but but textures also.
You know, I like the vertical mark. Formally, it does. It makes things kind of stand up. You know, if you you could have the same shape and go horizontal, and it goes like flat, and then things go. If you paint the same shape with vertical marks, it starts to stand up a little bit. For me, that starts to flatten the space a little bit, which is something that I'm also curious about. I think the mark making also, way before I was an artist, I think when I spent like a year in Taiwan, and my grandmother sent me to this artist across the street to study drawing, and all we did was make marks. I have like these sheets of paper with like 1,000 marks, and then he would circle one, and you go, oh, that's a nice one. I mean, I was literally 5 years old. It was insane. That's a little bit of it. But I think more so, it's a formalness of trying to flatten the space and collapse it so that the figure in the ground kind of disappears.